Hi, everybody. What this broadcast is about is Jeffrey Epstein's New Mexico ranch, what it's close to, why he had it in New Mexico, just to throw a little bit of focus on it. Now, as you know, I've already done the charts of Ghislaine, Jeffrey Epstein, and I threw in a bit of a discussion about Robert Maxwell. But I think to add context to the chart reading and to just flush out this whole story, I'm preparing a series of vlogs. Most of them will be in person rather than on the computer like this. So it's a chat, and I'll do it on a live. And I really want to talk about the intricacies. I'm going to talk about Robert Maxwell, how he's linked in. That's the father of Ghislaine. I'm going to talk about her sisters, how they linked in. I'm going to also talk about the Bronfman family, Alan Dershowitz, just bring the whole thing together to give you a full picture. I've sourced my information from numerous different places, and so I feel that I'm going to give you the best overview, because there's a lot of information you can pick and choose from here and there. No one's covering the full thing, but I feel I'm quite a good editor of information, so I'm going to bring that to you just to add context to my chart reading and to then go back to the chart reading and see how that all fits in with it, right, in terms of predictions for Ghislaine Maxwell. So what we're looking at here is a map of the region of New Mexico. Now, that little orange dot is approximately where Jeffrey Epstein's Zorro ranch is. Now, I did go into Google Maps and I tried to get an aerial shot, but they've obviously blanked out the area where his ranch is, so they don't want you looking at it for some reason. But that's roughly the area. Now, it's an incredibly remote area. If we just go, sorry, wrong map. If we just go up here, you can see why he needed an island, and also why he needed this place in New Mexico, because an island, unless you can swim really well, which you probably can't swim that well, you're not going to get off it. And here, if you escape the ranch, you are running into the most inhospitable terrain in searingly hot temperatures, with no water, with no infrastructure, with no villages for absolute miles. You can just see how harsh this terrain is. There's Santa Fe. It was roughly south of Santa Fe, and Albuquerque's down there. So this is the region where it is. Totally dry, unforgiving. If you were in that ranch, you were basically trapped unless someone took you out in a car. You couldn't run away. So that's an interesting consideration. However, it goes a lot deeper than that. So I'm going to be consulting an article, and I'll put a link to it below so you can read it all yourself. So Mexico, it says, is a place of secrets. It's called the Land of Enchantment, and over the years, there's been a lot of crazy stuff going on there. So Epstein purchased this ranch called Zorro, south of Santa Fe, and the area is rather interesting because, as you can see, there's Los Alamos, which is not very far from Santa Fe and not very far from Jeffrey Epstein's ranch, and that's where the world's first nuclear weapon, codenamed Gadget, was detonated on July 16, 1945. It's called the Trinity Site, and it's on the U.S. Army's White Sands Missile Range, and this was the that area there, Los Alamos, and that was actually the that's wrong. It's not in that area. The area where it was detonated in the White Sands is down here. It's more towards what's that area called down there? I'll get back to it now. It's in the White Sands missile range is towards that area, so it's further south of Albuquerque, and it was the epicenter of a highly secret government conspiracy involving top physicists. It was called the Manhatten Project, and this Trinity is in a 111-mile straight line south from the Zorro Ranch. So there you go, south of Zorro Ranch, and it's heading down south of Santa Fe, south of Albuquerque, in this direction. So that's the first thing. It's got a nuclear history, which is rather interesting because I believe there was also something going on with nuclear technology with Ghislaine and Jeffrey Epstein. So, okay, they say that if you find Epstein's New Mexico Operations Center, which is right there, and you put the Trinity site, which is down in that direction, and you 111 miles south, and you draw a circle, with that as the epicenter and 110 as the radius, what else do you find within that circle? Well, plenty of interesting things. So first of all, you've got Santa Fe, which, as you can see, here's old Santa Fe, and it's got a rather interesting history as well. For example, there's an open air park, or was an open air park, as part of the the Santa Fe, and there was a Haagen-Dazs at one corner and a drugstore called Zook's Pharmacy, which doubled as a base for Russian espionage. So in between filling out prescriptions and ringing up customers, there was a deep cover Stalinist spy there who plotted the death of Leon Trotsky. Now, if you remember, Leon Trotsky was murdered in Mexico. Now, the Mexico border is not very far from here, from Santa Fe, heading south. He was murdered with an ice pick, and it was actually in Santa Fe, in this pharmacy, where the murder of Trotsky, who was by then a enemy of Stalin, because, you know, Stalin, Lenin, Trotsky, they all started off as big friends, but they went their different ways. Stalin was more interested in a nationalistic form of communism, where Trotsky was an internationalist, who wanted to spread communism all around the world. And the type of conspiracy we see by the cabal at the moment is Trotskyist in nature. It's an international New World Order type communism, which was exactly what Trotsky was interested in. So yeah, so that's where his murder was plotted by the Stalinists. So there's a lot of other strange things. For example, there's the Arm & Hammer United World College of the American West, which is a selective international boarding school in Montezuma, founded by Arm & Hammer, remember that name, and Prince Charles, of all people. So there, Prince Charles crops up. So it was originally a resort hotel built on hot springs sacred to the Guerrilla Apache, and previous inhabitants of I'm reading this article all wrong. Sorry about that. So, for example, let me just come back to Arm & Hammer and his institute. If you watch my vlog on why capitalists love communism, and also my recent vlog on China, Arm & Hammer was one of the key funders of Bolshevism. He funded Lenin, he funded the whole Bolshevik movement, he was funding the Russian Revolution, and he funded a lot of the 5-year plans and the industrial building up of the Soviet Union. So again, we have a link here to Bolshevism in this particular area. So there you've got the Arm & Hammer Institute. So now Bill Richardson, who in recently unsealed court records was named by Virginia Roberts Giuffre as a participant in Epstein's illegal sex abuse ring, and he was on Epstein's plane numerous times. It's claimed he was a lecturer at this United World College between 2001 and 2002. This was in between his stints as Bill Clinton's Secretary of Energy and New Mexico's governor. So Richardson apparently only showed up once, that the students were aware of, to publicly hobnob with Queen Noor of Jordan and Greece's Prince Pavlos in advance of his gubernatorial run. So there you go. So that's another little bit of interesting stuff going on in this particular region. If you want to have a look for Jeffrey Epstein's place, look up Zorro Ranch Road, New Mexico, and you'll see the road that leads to it, but the tip of the road, it's just a bit blurry. You can't see anything there. So what have we got here? We have circled it in green, right? This is what I'm going to be talking about now. There are many sites where the Catholic Church hid paedophile priests in local parishes, until, of course, there was a tsunami of lawsuits from victims who forced Mexico's largest diocese to file for bankruptcy. So one of these places is Jemez Springs, which is an isolated resort town in the middle of this area, right here, okay? So it's in the middle of the Pueblo Nations and national forests, and the distance from Zorro Ranch is 50 miles. So in this region, the Catholic Church still operates 1 or 2 treatment centers in the United States for pedophile priests. They are treated by fellow members of the order fellow members of the cloth who belong to an order called the Servants of the Paraclete. The Paraclete, of course, being the Holy Ghost. So, you know, one wonders about the mental health care available for victims and whether they'll ever rely on the Paraclete again. So, of course, pedophile priests are still being supposedly rehabilitated in that area. So there you have the theme of pedophilia. So a little over 80 miles northwest of Zorro Ranch is the Trementina base, which is a bunker and a vault complex owned by the Church of Spiritual Scientology. So let's have a look northwest. So we're looking towards, there's his place here. We're looking northwest to the Apache Nation Reserve there, right? So this is where apparently there are hardened rooms which are storing Ron Hubbard's writings. So Hubbard, of course, who was the founder of Scientology, his thoughts on the Thetans will survive anything because they're reportedly inscribed on etched steel plates in titanium containers filled with inert argon gas. So the location isn't exactly secret, because the CST's logos, two interlocking circles with diamonds, can actually be seen in aerial photos carved into high desert scrub, ostensibly to help guide Hubbard's spirit back to its new body. What is that, like some 0 point thing for the soul or something? Sounds really weird, isn't it? According to the members of Scientology, once Hubbard adopts a new body, he is expected to make his way to one of these CST bases here, like the Trementina base. That's what an insider said. And that's where he's going to be raised and taken care of. So do you see here this important information? Because reincarnation, this Ron Hubbard is going to reincarnate himself. It reminds me of Ray Kurzweil, who's got his mother frozen because he's going to bring her back to life. These elites are obsessed with living forever, and I strongly believe that other than cloning, these were the heart of the experiments going on at Epstein's lodge. The mainstream media tell you he was just trying to spread his seed and impregnate as many women as possible because he thought his genes were absolutely wonderful. But I think there's more to it. Here you go. This is this weird place, Scientology, another religion of the cult, something odd going on there if we look closer into Scientology. And that's what's going on here, guys. That's what he's doing. These elites don't want to die. They're Satanists. They've got no spirituality. They don't believe in the life hereafter. These are the same people that were involved in the Red Terror, in the slaughter of others. They've done so much wrong. Pedophilia, Aleister Crowley, it's all linked to the occult. And what are they all seeking? To live forever. To reclone themselves, clone a body and then kind of download their personality to the new clone body. I don't know what they're doing. Life extension, anything like that. But it's definitely not life after death. So that's another major theme, as you can see, epitomized by what's going on in that area. So there we go. It says, if you're rich and you're powerful and you're committed to doing something strange and opaque, then it's New Mexico that will beckon, as it did for Epstein. So on February 22nd, in 1993, the New Mexico State Land Office granted an agricultural land lease near an unincorporated community of Stanley. Yes, there's a very small community. It's basically just a few houses in a very impoverished community called Stanley. That's the nearest sort of what you could call a town. It's more like a village or a hamlet that's near his ranch. So they granted a lease of this land near Stanley to the Zorro Trust. And the Zorro Trust was just a shell company for Jeffrey Epstein. And the address recorded for the trust was 457 Madison Avenue, which is today the headquarters of the Trunk Club, which is a personal shopping service. I wonder, I'm thinking Wayfair, right? Are you thinking personal shopping? Maybe money laundering? Maybe something nefarious like the whole Wayfair scandal? Well, I don't know. I'm not saying anything. I haven't researched the Trunk Club. This is only a guess. So, it's probably nothing going on, but, my mind just couldn't help wonder. So on the same day, the Zorro Trust completed a purchase of land owned by members of the King family, who were a powerful New Mexico agricultural and political dynasty. So Zorro's deal included rights to the King's leases on public lands, a total of 1,159 acres, which would be rented for $872 a year. The largest private landowners in New Mexico are either outside billionaires or family dynasties. So this New Mexico area, it's almost like an experimental playground for the rich and famous. What are they doing here? What are they experimenting with? What the hell is going down? So Stephanie Garcia Richard, she is the New Mexico Land Commissioner. She was telling the journalist that she had this thick binder with a record of every interaction Epstein had had with the Land Commission, and it involved only a small portion of his New Mexico playground because the 50,000 square foot mansion was situated on private land. So there were a few details that stood out. So for all the care he took in purchasing it through shell companies and lawyers, the little things were often neglected, like he'd amassed, like the November after which he'd amassed all the lands, he had to get a letter for not paying his grazing fees. And so his annual costs for leasing the land were incurring 2% interest because he hadn't paid the fees. So, you'd think people would pay their fees if they were trying to be secretive, wouldn't you? So the next year, Epstein sought approval to construct a grass strip runway for a private plane on the New Mexico state land that was within his lease. But the state wanted to send out inspectors to see the site of the proposed runway, and so his request was quickly withdrawn, and he later built another runway on his private land that he outright owned. So in 2004, a variance from the State Land Commissioner allowed Epstein to build a section of raised railroad track where he wanted to park an antique Santa Fe railroad caboose in sight of the Creston petroglyphs, which is nearly 5,000 catalogued pictograms left behind by the original inhabitants of the Castillo Basin 600 years ago. So, yeah, there's quite a lot going on there with like I say, with these 5,000-year-old pictograms, which reminds me that Ghislaine's sister's husband, they now live in France, are very interested in ancient artifacts in southern France. And here Jeffrey Epstein seems to be very interested in this area where there's ancient artifacts from another ancient culture. So maybe that links to the whole Aleister Crowley thing. But people in the Epstein circle are not only interested in the future and in projecting their body into the future by staying alive forever. They're not only interested in science, in technology like CRISPR, in gene technology, in eugenics, in changing the human genome, and in transhumanism. They're not only interested in that, they're also massively interested in ancient history. They're looking for secrets that people 5,000 years ago knew that maybe they don't know now. So there's an interest there as well. So Zorro wasn't Epstein's only New Mexico investment. Besides the alleged illicit assaults and sex trafficking to the rich and powerful, he had other interests like eugenics, where he was involved with Bill Gates, cryogenics, that's similar to Ray Kurzweil having his mother frozen to bring her to life again, so he's got an interest in that, and theoretical physics. And New Mexico filled those needs nicely, because groundbreaking work on all three fields have been done in New Mexico since the Manhattan Project after World War II. Another important thing, the United States imported Nazi war criminals to help run their fledgling program, which was based in New Mexico. That's Operation Paperclip, where all the Nazi rocket scientists and key scientists, including some of the scientists I think that were working with Mengele, were brought over to carry on their experiments in where else but New Mexico. And there they used their skills in rocketry, and they also brought Nazis over to continue their ghastly human experiments because they thought it would help the US retain the edge over the communists. But as we know, the top people in the cabal were never trying to get an edge over the communists. They were just trying to introduce communism into America. So that's not what was really happening. So it says there, Epstein, who was a canny investor, saw value in both the physical and human terrain of New Mexico. And he pumped more than $250,000, probably of Leslie Wexner's money, or money that came from somewhere else, from Robert Maxwell when he stole from the pension funds, or from intelligence agencies probably as well. All this money was pumped into the Santa Fe Institute. So here we go back, there's old Santa Fe. And the Santa Fe Institute is a think tank for theoretical researchers, and that's where Epstein befriended co-founder and the quark theory pioneer Murray Gell-Mann. Cormac McCarthy is one trustee of the Santa Fe Institute. Pierre Omidyar is another. And when this journalist called a well-connected Santa Fe lawyer, the attorney told him to look at the institute and ask about Gell-Mann's reputation around town. Well, so anyway, the guy went to find out. So he, let's say in quotes, when these men describe Epstein, Vanity Fair wrote of men of letters Epstein collected. They talk about energy and curiosity, as well as a love for theoretical physics that they don't ordinarily find in a layman. Gell-Mann rather sweetly mentions that there were always pretty ladies around Epstein when he went for dinner there. So you see, Epstein was drawing all these scientists. He was donating money to scientific causes. He was donating money to research. Then he was inviting all these scientists to dinner parties where they would be titillated, and during which obviously everything was recorded, and maybe he could ask questions. He was a layman. Someone probably in the know gave him the right questions to ask them so he could get them nice and tipsy, get their eyes on the girls, get their concentration off, and steal secrets for either the security agency he was working through, for Mossad, for another security company, or to send to China. So he's pumping all these scientists for information to use for his own personal purposes, whatever's going on at the ranch here, the life extension, or the physics, whatever's going on, nuclear physics, new technology, cryogenics, transhumanism, technocracy, getting all sorts of scientific information which he's going to siphon off for others. So the journalist goes on to say, when I drove out to the institute to ask, that's the Santa Fe Institute, to ask about its connections, no one bothered me as I wandered around. Eventually, a spokeswoman provided the statement that, contrary to certain statements in Epstein's bios, he was not actively involved at the Santa Fe Institute other than as an infrequent donor, and the Institute has rejected any funding from Epstein after 2010. This person called Gelman could not be reached for comment, and he actually died prior to Epstein at the age of 89. So again, they're trying to kind of distance themselves from them. So Gene Peach, who is a Santa Fe photographer, he's had his eye on Zorro since the late 90s. And he says that after news of Epstein's arrest broke, he spoke with several Stanley area ranchers, none of whom ever saw Epstein or had any idea of what went on at his ranch. And the locals said they'd only know when the Epstein crowd was at the ranch because the mansion, the lights drowned out the stars. And he said that's no small feat in that part of New Mexico. So a lot of people thought Epstein owned Victoria's Secret because there was always a bevy of glamorous women wandering around, and they'd show up at the ranch's double gate off Highway 41. And I can see there in the picture Highway 40, can't see Highway 41, but as I say, the ranch is sort of in that area. So they report that the locals had always had mixed feelings about their furtive big city neighbor, and Epstein's property taxes, however, were a blessing to the community. So they were kind of glad to have him there because he was pumping money into the community, even though they didn't have a clue what he was up to. But guess what? Tom Ford has a nearby 7-figure ranch as well. So yeah, another person in the vicinity. I mean, there's not much going on here. You're not going to go to this area for the nightlife or for the scenery. You're going to go there to get away from it all, or to conduct something that's a little bit nefarious, wouldn't you think? So now the Attorney General's office is going to review all the allegations of criminal conduct connected to Epstein in New Mexico, and the office has its own special anti-corruption unit. However, despite Epstein being convicted of the child trafficking back in 2008, he was never registered in New Mexico as a sex offender, which is rather odd. I suppose they wanted his money, right? Goes on to say here what I just said: in the 11 years since Epstein's Florida conviction for prostituting a minor, New Mexico failed to ever require him to register as a sex offender. To some extent, the authorities were passive rather than reactive in the Epstein affair. New Mexico failed to even require him to register as a sex offender, exactly, and his death has had no effect on the leases he held. And a state land office representative said, because they're owned by his holding company, which will not expire till 2021, it's fair to assume that whatever went on at the Zorro Ranch will never fully come to light. New Mexico is, after all, but one place in America where powerful people who enjoy the use of its land in government, business, finance, religion, and science have consistently demonstrated a pattern of deception and disregard for the people of New Mexico. Epstein's ring was large enough and existed over a long enough period of time that one might be tempted to think of it as just one cell in a hive of secrets living in the high desert. So we can ask, who benefits now from ignoring how long Jeffrey Epstein managed to operate in New Mexico? Because nestled among so many government secrets, covert operations, religious enclaves, and futurist laboratories, maybe we could find a clue. Maybe we should be looking more closely at New Mexico, which no one is doing. They might be thinking of the island, but everyone's ignoring New Mexico. What did the raid provide? What did the raid find? We don't have access to this information. How could we get it? It must be fascinating. What did they find at this New Mexico ranch? It holds the key to everything, partially because its location reveals how many important secrets it held. So, just to sum up, guys, this area of New Mexico hides many secrets. Down to the south is the area where they tested the first nuclear bomb, part of the Manhatten Project. You can currently go and have a look there as part of a tour. I can't remember. It's near the town that's on the border with New Mexico. It's not, obviously, I've got Santa Fe and Albuquerque in my mind. I can't think of what it's called. It's a place where Debbie Reynolds was born. It's on the border there. You guys can remind me of that. El Paso, that's right. It's near to El Paso, which is directly south of Albuquerque. That's the White Sands. Then we've got the Catholic Church covering up pedophilia, hiding pedophilic priests at resorts here, and then eventually establishing dioceses to deal with them or to rehabilitate them. We've got Los Alamos over there. We've got the area where Ron Hubbard is kind of buried, and all his manuscripts and teachings are perfectly kept in bunkers of special gases to preserve them, and where they think, you know, the second coming of Hubbard is going to happen in this particular area. There we've got our link to cryogenics. We've got the Santa Fe Institute, we've got the Arm and Hammer Institute, Arm and Hammer being a key proponent of Bolshevism and funding the Soviet Union. We've got people like Bill Richardson contributing to the Santa Fe Institute here. We've got Prince Charles involved in the Santa Fe Institute again. Why? Why was Prince Charles involved in this? I mean, you've got to wonder. And then finally, Epstein's Ranch, that's right, and the Bronfmans also have a facility not far from here, and I will be covering the Bronfmans and the NXVIM cult in another video. And of course, we started off by talking in Santa Fe about the pharmacy, the Zook pharmacy, where the KGB or the NKVD, whatever it was operating and plotting the assassination of Trotsy with an ice pick in Mexico. So I hope you enjoyed that little pass through, and I'll put a link to the article so you can read it yourself, and just to show you the terrain there to get there's old Santa Fe. Just look at this unforgiving terrain, and he's over here somewhere, Jeffrey Epstein's ranch down there somewhere. Okay guys, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope the sound came up well, and as I say, please look out for lots more lives where I'll be chatting about Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, the Bronfmans, the Maxwell family, and the whole shebang. Okay, look forward to seeing you soon guys.